he's known as a brain eater and the most dangerous prisoner in the UK. Robert Monsley has been in solitary confinement for 46 years, and he doesn't have an easy camera at all. It's a glass cage underground with 17 doors. Robert and his siblings were removed from the family when he was just 6 months old. All this happened because of child abuse. Robert and his siblings grew up in an orphanage, and these were truly happy days in Robert's life. Those were, in my opinion, the only happy days in his life. But when Robert turned 9 years old, the parents were like that. We decided to take all the children back to us. It's not clear who the hell allowed them to do this, but they did it. Spoiler alert, there have been no changes in parenting. They lived in terrible conditions. They were treated terribly, especially Robert's father. George, that was the name of the father of the family, was a real monster. He bullied a 9-year-old child. Robert and his siblings lived with their parents for another year, and then custody finally took them away. At the age of 16, Robert began to get involved in illegal substances and he was left alone on the street, and it was the only option to earn some money. At that moment, Robert needed mental support more than ever because he felt that everything was fine. He was hearing voices in his head and needed help. He visited various psychiatric hospitals. He repeatedly told doctors that he hears voices in his head telling him to kill his parents. Every time, from story to story, there are people who are aware of everything that is happening, but they just sit like that, put their hands together and look at everything that is happening. Robert turned 20 in March. He was with his client. They were lying in bed, minding their own business, and suddenly his client John Farrell gets out of bed, goes to the bedside table, pushes back the locker and takes out photos with children. They were lying in bed, doing their own thing, and suddenly his client John Farrell gets out of bed, goes to the bedside table, pulls back the locker and takes out photos with children. I think you understand the content of these photos, since Robert had a difficult childhood, which I mentioned earlier. It probably became a trigger, and he just killed his client in cold blood. But the most interesting thing is that he didn't even try to hide his crime. He just went to the police and told them about it. And the police decided that they could not try him, because Robert was clearly a mentally ill person. And that's how Robert ended up in his first psychiatric hospital. Robert lived in this hospital for a good handful of years. It was there that he realized that he hated people, and it was his vocation in life to clean the planet of dirty death files. At the age of 23, Robert met another patient in a psychiatric hospital. His name was David Allen Francis. He was convicted of the so-called death format crime. And then, in fact, the reckoning came. Robert just hated David because he reminded him of his father. Robert also told all the patients that he was going to kill David. And it was then that he found himself an accomplice to the crime. By the way, his name was also David, and so the two of them start planning a murder. This is where all the fun begins, because it's still a mystery to me how this is even possible. Robert steals a plastic spoon from the kitchen and files its handle. Thus, the plastic spoon became a weapon. One day, when the three men were alone, Robert closed the room. It was a truly brutal and prolonged attack. They were locked in the room for 9 hours. They couldn't be opened, no staff, nothing. They just killed David for 9 hours. The first thing I don't understand is why the staff couldn't open the door. At 9 o'clock, you could break down the door, you could remove the spell, and anything could be done in 9 hours. But for some reason, no one did anything. And the second thing that I don't understand, I'll tell you now. After 9 hours of brutal assault, David, of course, died. Robert calmly opened the door and, as if nothing had happened, just walked out of the cell. The price that the hospital staff saw in this room was truly terrible. When the hospital staff checked the body, they found that there was no brain. Robert ate David's brain with a spoon and with a plastic spoon. Do you remember that Robert was previously unfit for trial? This time it became usable. He was sentenced to life in prison, certainly early release, but that's not all. This is just the beginning. It just so happened that there were many criminals in this prison who were convicted of a death crime. Lucky Robert. We already know how Robert feels about them. Robert has been in this prison for a year now. The voices in his head keep telling him that he needs to go and do something. So Robert started planning a new crime. Everything is going according to plan. Robert takes a spoon, sharpens it, and it turns into a tool. Nothing new, just proven old stuff. And anyway, he goes to his cellmate with the sharpened spoon. Stanley Darwood was in prison for murdering his wife and abusing children. Robert attacked him with his spoon, and after finishing his job, he pushed the body under the bed, cleaned himself up, and moved on. Robert visited another prisoner named William Roberts. This man was in prison for crimes committed against children. Robert attacked him with a spoon in a rage. I thought I should be afraid of a fork. As they say, one stroke is four holes. It turns out that you can do a lot with a spoon there, even a plastic one. After that, as before, Robert did not try to hide his crime. He approached the prison guard, handed him a spoon, and told him that this time his rounds would be shorter. And again, Robert really just doesn't care about what's going on because he thinks he's clearing the earth of criminals. It was decided that Robert was too dangerous a criminal, and keeping him with other criminals is just dangerous. Robert was placed in solitary confinement at the age of 25. Eventually, the prison built a separate cell for Robert. It was a very small glass cage so that Robert could be watched from all sides. The cage is underground, and to get there, you need to go through 17 holes. Then 17, you ask? I don't know. The prison guards are not allowed to talk to him. And this is Robert's last photo.